Alrighty, welcome back. This is Levi, and this is Commanding the Zones. Today we're going to go ahead and talk about what is competitive EDH, and what is the meaning of competitive play, and why is competitive play fun. First thing I'd like to mention is that I am at heart a Spike player, and if you don't quite know what the Spike, Johnny, and Timmy archetypes are, there's a couple great articles, and I'll post the links below to them. But they're essentially, um, you have Timmy, the guy who likes to play big creatures. I shouldn't say it's the stereotypical noob, but essentially it kind of is. Like it's the guy who likes to play usually green or likes to play the giant big creatures and turn things sideways. Like he likes to play creatures and likes to turn them sideways. Then you have the Johnnies, and Johnnies are the people who like to play combos, and they really enjoy card interactions with each other. Like they're the guys that'll assemble those combos that take 6 or 7 cards, and they just make something crazy happen on the field. That's kind of the essence of a Johnny. Well, Spike, on the other hand, is the guy who doesn't really come up with these ideas himself, but instead tries to just play the best of the best. When he looks at cards, he sees them for what value they have in certain formats and tries to play just the absolute best, and gets the most joy out of the game from winning, more than the card interactions or big things. I think most EDH players probably fall into the first two categories, the Johnnies and Timmies, but there are actually a fair amount of people who play Spike as well. And first thing we're going to go ahead and talk about here is the Spike essence of EDH. And in so much that there was such a Spike feel for EDH that the 1v1 scene came up, and it got more popular more so in the European scene than it did in here in America. And over there, though, especially in France, they have what they call French Commander. And French Commander and I'll go ahead and just click this real quick, and this will take us to the French Commander website. This is basically, it has their rules, their ban list. It tells you that the players they start the game with 30 life. They have the ability to put their guy back in the command zone, whether it would be tucked or not, and that's kind of something a little different. Like whereas in multiplayer Commander, if you were to cast a card that would put a general into the library, or even their hand, I believe, you have to do that. Whereas in French Commander, at that point you have the option to go ahead and put it back into the command zone. So that is completely different than what we're used to seeing. Main thing is matches are because French Commander does get played in tournaments quite often. Actually, matches are best of 3. Since games can take more time than in the smaller formats, they get a recommended 55 minutes, and there's also no sideboards used between the 3 games. There is a different ban list, and the reason I bring up the French ban list is this should give you an idea of in our multiplayer games for the people who play EDH in multiplayer, which understand that the majority of my games I do play in EDH are multiplayer games. I do have a few people that I do play 1v1 with on a regular basis, but for the most part I play multiplayer Commander. But this right here is a good idea of which cards are going to be super powerful in multiplayer. And I mean, this shares a lot of the same cards that are in the normal EDH ban list provided to us from the rules committee. But there are some cards like Mana Crypt, Mana Drain, Mana Vault, Soul Ring, some of these like Crucible of Worlds. These are all great examples of cards that are legal. Hermit Druid, even Hermit Druid combo. Oh, I'll have to feature that deck. That is a ridiculous deck. The Moto Days of Fearing Hermit Druid. But anyhow, getting sidetracked there by such a great card. These are cards that when you're building a competitive multiplayer deck that you should keep an eye out for, because they are going to cause. I mean, there's a reason they're banned in French. Let's just put it that way. Like, if there's a reason there's banned, it's probably because it's too good, and so you should run it in your multiplayer list. But getting back to the reason I'm here talking about MTG Top 8 is that MTG Top 8 is one of the few sites I found. It's not because I enjoy net decking and I don't enjoy originality, And like I said, I do play a majority of multiplayer games, so a lot of my multiplayer decks are actually facets of original decks that I've modified with cards that are either banned or cards that I feel work better in multiplayer than their single player version works. But here we can go ahead and see, and they do, the formatting is a little different than what we're used to. It goes by month, day, then year, which is a little bit, or sorry, no, it's day, month, year. That's what it is, which I believe is actually the standard format over in Europe, whereas we do it day, month, year. Or wait, no, we go month, day, year. That's right, month, day, year. They do day, month, year. Anyhow, though, so on the website, basically how you can kind of read the site is that it gives you a breakdown of the types, the archetypes that see play. You have aggro, control, and combo. There are technically rogue decks. You kind of have to find them. They're just usually listed in the other. But generally speaking, though, this tells you that 41% of the one-on-one commander games that are played are aggro decks, 33% are control, and 26% are combo. They also follow ban lists. Certain generals are banned, and we'll talk about those at a certain point, but things of note, if you're playing multiplayer commander, some of the top tier generals you can be running are going to be Edric, Zur, and Derevi. All of them are incredibly degenerate and make people not want to play with you. That's how spiked they are. Another thing too, and I'd like to throw this out there real quick, because I did want to touch bases on the idea of fun, and the whole entire point of my program on here on YouTube, Commanding the Zones, is about creating and helping the players who want to play Spike EDH, like who want to be completely aggressive and be the kind of guy that aims to win every game he plays and has no mercy and isn't there for, like, the way he finds fun in the game is they're winning. I'm not saying that other people can't have fun with him, but generally speaking, he wants to have fun. And the reason I bring this up is because the people I play with, the groups I usually play with, are in the same mindset. So all of our decks are incredibly tuned, incredibly up there. I mean, I play against a guy who plays a Prosh deck, and the multiplayer Prosh deck, if you haven't seen it, and I'll feature it one of these days, the multiplayer Prosh deck is incredibly fast, in so much that, again, and take this with just a grain of salt, that Sheldon from the Rules Council said if given the chance, he would have Prosh gone. Again, that's not his say, that's just his own personal opinion. So, with that in mind, you know, his deck consistently can win on turn 3 or 4 if not checked. But see, that's the great thing about playing Super Spike Commander, right? Is that when you have a full group that's everyone in your group is Super Spike, and everyone's running and stuff like that, it really creates a meta game. And that's something that's kind of important, because every group you play with creates its own meta, and that sounds kind of strange because some people don't really agree with this theory. And it's funny because actually one of the guys I play with at a shop here, he's actually an incredibly good friend of mine by the name of Jether. We play, and he's a really good player, and he plays kind of a medium to high range of decks. He doesn't play necessarily top tier deck or top tier commanders, but he plays top tier cards within those commanders, so he's fairly competitive to play against and incredibly enjoyable to play against. But for quite some time I was known for playing a Heartbeat combo Riku deck that was pretty suppressive. I mean, it took infinite amount of turns, untapped constantly. It was pretty nigh unstoppable. Because the way Riku's nature is, since every spell doubled, it meant all of my counter spells became 2 counter spells, so all of my spells were doubly protected. It was just a really, really nice deck. But anyhow, it got to the point though where he said that it wasn't fun that I was playing this way, and that it was, you know, suppressing to the other players, and that they no longer, he said it's going to cause people to no longer want to play with me. And I found this interesting because I had not heard that from anyone else besides him, and so, you know, and I took it to heart from him. But the interesting thing was, it was the very next weekend we went back to the shop. 2 other guys had changed and modified their decks and made their decks better, more competitive. And one of them even said, because of you guys, we're having to we play a more aggressive game now. And so I thought, you know what, let me just, let me ask. I was like, well, is it more enjoyable for you? And he said, honestly, at first it wasn't when we were playing decks that were tuned for a more casual game. But now that we're making our decks tuned to a more aggressive, more competitive game, the game quality and the skill level of the game has gone up. And so that alone made it worth my day, because that in essence is what a meta is. It's when people have to bring an answer or start brainstorming or coming up with ways to deal with something, and when they do, their decks progressively get better for the meta. And that's exactly what I was trying to create, and I think we've created that there. And I think now, after about 4 months of consistently meeting with that group, we've created a very tight meta there that is fairly aggressive and really fun to play with. The great thing with competitive EDH decks too is that on average our games usually last about 30 to 45 minutes, as opposed to like the 3 or 4 hour long games. That's not to say our games can't go fairly long. In fact, I think just 2 weekends ago we ended up having a game where me and this other guy pretty much locked each other out of the game, but the game ended up going 2 hours with just us two left in the game. Fairly interesting story behind it, but I'll talk about that another time. I don't want to get derailed too much off of what I'm talking about here. But the main thing I wanted to talk about here with MTG Top 8 is that, like I said, it gives a nice little breakdown of the Commander metagame. And one of the things I'd like to mention is you see these little stars here next to the date. This tells you how many people attended the event. Now, something I want to ask my viewers really quickly is, how many people do you guys think on average attend these Commander events? Like official Commander 1v1 tournaments, just on average over in Europe. I know if you're like me, you're thinking probably somewhere between, like if you think about a local shop that's not too big, you get about 20 or so people. That's a good turnout, right? Well, prepare to be surprised, because some of these numbers are just absolutely astounding. So this one alone, the Commander Super Series Eras, had 137 players. That is insane. I mean, we're talking about professional events that see about 400 players. This is 1/4 of that showing up for a Commander event. Absolutely awesome. It makes me so happy to see that Commander's taken off so much to the point that it has this kind of turnout for a professional scene. I really wish this happened in America, because I would totally be in on it. Whether or not it was 1v1 or multiplayer, I would totally be there for it, just to support the format and what it is. And I know that a lot of what I'm talking about here kind of goes against what the Rules Council always tries to say. I mean, one of Sheldon's big things is about embracing the chaos, and I do think that is a fun thing to do, and that I think there is a side of that is there. But I also enjoy the tactical aspect of Commander, and the aspect of being able to know that you can play better than your opponents. One of the common phrases you'll hear with that is, with Spike Commander like this, you'll hear a lot of people call it Legacy Singleton, and they're not wrong. Like, a lot of it is kind of Legacy Singleton. So here I'm going to go ahead and take a sample out of this one that I clicked into, just because we're already here, and show you that the first place deck was a Janara Sword of War. And if you remember when I was mentioning banned commanders, Derevi was Bant colored, and so is Janara. And Janara actually literally takes the Derevi deck minus a couple combos that Derevi enabled, and pretty much plays the exact same deck. So Janara is pretty nice. She's a 3 mana for a 3/3 flyer, pay 2, put a ++1 counter on her. She's just a pretty good flying bear that pretty much can always see value. Like, you can just toss extra mana into her on the end of your turns and make her fairly large. And the deck is just packed full of cards that are just amazing. I mean, when I was talking earlier, if you watch any of my other deck tech videos, I talk about how cards in Commander are worth what they can do, like what their value is, not necessarily getting a 2-for-1 or a 3-for-1, but more about the flexibility of what the card can do itself. And you'll also notice that the power of small mana creatures, what I like to call mana dorks, are fairly relevant in this format, and I found that they are completely relevant as well in multiplayer Commander. The only backside or drawback to that is that multiplayer Commander does run a lot more Wrath Wrath of God type effects, so they can be lesser, but on the flip side, you can always switch out the mana dorks with what we like to call mana rocks, signets and talismans, those sorts of things, which, dodge the wrath removal and pretty much fulfill the same kind of, or they fulfill the exact same mechanic, actually. They will give you mana. Just really quickly looking through this, we have a couple mana dorks. We have a Mother of Runes, classic legacy card, a Scavenging Ooze, Sword of Temptation, Noble Hierarch, Bloom Tender, Snapcaster, Lotus Cobra. I mean, just look at this. I mean, Stoneforge Mystic, Gilded Drake, Revelarch. I mean, all these cards are cards that you would almost expect to see in a legacy and or modern deck. I mean, just every single one of these cards is just complete value. Just they either do something that they can do multiple times, or they block an opponent out. Just so good. A couple key cards I want to talk about really fast in this deck that seem they're not quite out there, but they're also really good in multiplayer as well. Aven Mind Sensor. This card does not see enough play in multiplayer, in my opinion. It is just the ultimate no card, and is so devastatingly fun when somebody cracks a fetch land and you just go in response, Aven Mind Center. Hope you find that land you were looking for in the top 4. It's just such a great card. Mama. Go to mama. Sorry about that. That was my son just woke up. I do a lot of my recordings really late at night. It's almost 1 o'clock in the morning here. But anyhow, back to what I was saying. Alright, so Aven Mind Sensor is one that doesn't see a ton of play in EDH, but probably should see more of. Another one is this guy, Gilded Drake. He used to see, I think he saw a lot more play back when EDH was still kind of fresh and people were able to get cards fairly cheap. This dude's now sitting at, looks like about 20 bucks here, 1944 on average. Which is a lot more than what I picked my set at. And it's funny because cards like this, I actually didn't own any Gilded Drakes. I picked them up strictly for EDH. I picked up a 4 set, and I think I picked them up at $5 a piece or something like that. So I paid 20 total for my set, and I got a 4 set. But this was ages ago, so. But this card's really good too. It's 2 mana, flying. When it comes into play, you just exchange control of it for another creature your opponent controls, and it's just really good. It's like, here, I'll take your commander, and you can have a 3/3 flying Drake. Have fun with that. There's just some really good cards here. I'm trying to see if there's anything else. A lot of these cards too, that there are cards in here that you don't see in multiplayer, and there's a reason for that. Memory Lapse you do see in multiplayer, but Daze and Mana Leak you don't see. And the reason for that is people will have lots of mana, and so if you draw Mana Leak late game, it doesn't do anything for you. It is a dead card. Daze is kind of the same way. The only way Daze really ever works is if you catch an opponent off guard, so that you can go ahead and counter a spell from theirs. Ancestral Vision, here's a card that I think should see more play in multiplayer Commander. It's 1 blue, suspend 4, then whenever it's done coming off suspend, target player draws 3 cards. It's just a straight up good card. The neat thing is a lot of people think, well, it's not that great, you have to wait 4 turns. The thing is exactly 4 turns from now, you're going to want those 3 cards. So if you cast this on turn 1, or suspend it on turn 1, 4 cards from now, the gas that it gives you is perfect. It's just perfectly timed gas. Force Spike is an example of a card you would probably never play in this format, or in multiplayer, but would totally play in one-on-one. Unexpectedly Absent. This card is actually really neat because I don't see hardly any multiplayer decks playing it. It came out in the new Commander stuff. I forget which deck exactly. But this card is actually really funny because it's actually seeing a lot of play in one-on-one. And here's the reason why. Is you pay 0 for X, and I don't think a lot of the more casual people or even people in multiplayer have realized this. But what you do is you wait until your opponent either cracks a fetch land or plays anything that allows them to shuffle their library. As soon as they go to shuffle their library, you pay 2 in response and put their commander or problem permanent on the top of their deck, and then it gets shuffled in. So essentially for 2 white mana, you can get rid of any permanent and put it back in the library. Such a great card. I really think this is another card that needs to see a little more play. There's really not too much else I see in here. You'll see a lot of the Parallaxes. There's a whole entire cycle of them from the set they came out in, which I believe was Judgment. Actually, I forget. No, the axe isn't Judgment. I forget which. I think that might be Nemesis. I'm not sure. This little set though, the Parallaxes. Parallax. They see a lot of play in the one-on-one because you can pretty much immediately play them, remove 5 counters off to lock somebody out for a turn, whether it's getting rid of all their creatures or getting rid of all their lands or whatever the Parallax that you played it. Because there's like Parallax Wave, Parallax Tide. There's a bunch of them. Or there's a cycle of 5. I shouldn't say there's a bunch. But they're really good on one-on-one, but not so much multiplayer. I wouldn't expect people to play multiplayer. But anyhow, so this is just an example of a genre deck that placed first out of 37 players. So, and this just happened a month ago. Like that's, or no, that happened this month actually. I'm sorry. Yeah, because it's only the 26th. So this just happened like 2 weeks ago. This event did. So just to kind of give you an idea of how fast this updates. Now I'm gonna go ahead and go back, and I'm gonna also show you guys down here. It looks like we had an event that updated just 4 days ago, on the 22nd, and we can go ahead and click into this, and this is going to show us, this is a much smaller event, kind of like what most people were thinking, more of a 22 players, but 22 players wants 1 star, and it's going to show you that Orlora won, Griselbrand, oh yeah, so Griselbrand, this is a card that's banned in multiplayer, but is not in one-on-one, but again, here's the reason why, is that because one-on-one does have a bigger, more in-depth ban list, that Griselbrand's not as broken, because of the things that he was abusing, they're gone now. So he's still really good, don't get me wrong. Don't think that I'm saying that he's, not so good because things are banned. He's incredibly good, but he's most of the time better as part of the 99 than actually as the general. And he's not nearly as, there's more broken things in one-on-one. But here he goes, a nice little example of a 22, a smaller one. So yeah, then it goes 1, 2, and 3 all the way up, or 1, 2, and 3. And then over here is kind of a neat little just random statistics that just kind of, and most of it's going to be lands obviously, but it's just telling you the most played cards in the format. That Command Tower sees 97% play through all these different deck lists. So you obviously would expect that majority of these are going to be lands, with the exception of Jace the Mind Sculptor. And, I can take some time and talk about him real fast. Jace the Mind Sculptor is a card that for the longest time when I played, just because I do play both formats, 1v1 and multiplayer, I for the longest time thought that Jace was pretty much a 1v1 card only, that in multiplayer he paints a giant target on your head, and that he's not going to stay around long enough to really have a meaningful impact on the game. Within this last month, actually, I've changed my opinion on that, and I think Jace, if you have a Jace the Mind Sculptor, is viable both in, not only viable, but necessary in decks that play blue in both multiplayer and singleton, or not singleton, multiplayer and 1v1. The card is just too good. I mean, it has 4 abilities, it just does so much. I mean, even if you were to play him as a 4-mana brainstorm, essentially, which sounds terrible, but I mean, it means that someone spent the time to turn a creature sideways and kill this guy. I mean, that's fine. Or they wasted a lightning bolt on it, which you'll hear me every once in a while joke about lightning bolt being cast in Commander, but you'd be surprised. In fact, even I'll go back to the Super Series just because I know, because I've been testing this guy's deck. This is a Nin the Paint Artist deck that placed, well, it was in the last 4 slots, so they don't rank them, but they were within the top 8. But this guy runs Lightning Bolt, and it's not uncommon for decks that splash red to run Lightning Bolt in this format, considering a lot of the generals are fairly smaller, and can also be killed by Lightning Bolt. Oh, whoops. There we go. And Lightning Bolt's just a pretty amazing card, it's really good. But in multiplayer Commander, it's obviously a lot less, and there's a lot better removal spells out there. One of which I want to kind of mention really fast, which shouldn't be played and if you're playing Spike, is Chaos Warp. A lot of people like to run Chaos Warp because it can tuck a commander, and this is the worst thing you can do. There's so many better bombs in someone's deck than their commander that the risk of hitting a bomb is just too high. Like, it's generally not worth it. I mean, every situation's different, so I mean, I could see people in the comments giving me a million different what-if situations where Chaos Warp would be good, but I'd rather not take the risk. I mean, when you can cut down on the chaos, it makes games a little more in your favor. Again, and that's the reason why you'll see a lot of tutors and a lot of the multiplayer decks that you'll see me feature on my deck techs. But you'll notice also in here, there's not really too much. I think the Mirage tutor cycle, which is like Enlightened, Vampiric, Worldly, Mystic, and Gamble. And it's weird to say Gamble is part of the cycle because it doesn't actually say tutor in its name. But Gamble, I believe, is part of the cycle. But anyhow, those tutors, the reason you don't see them banned in French is that they reveal the card, they put it on top, so they're kind of a slower tutor. Even though they can be cast at instant speed, they're not like Demonic Tutor and stuff, which I do believe is banned. So, but anyhow, so that's pretty much what I have for explaining what exactly competitive EDH is. This is obviously a little more leaning towards the 1v1 side, but what I'd like to challenge you guys to do is next time you guys are building a multiplayer deck and you want to build it more towards the spike side, come take a look at MTG Top 8. They have great deck lists, they have great ideas. You can click in here, they've got a variety of different decks, and you can either click the other and it'll give you a whole lot more. You can use the most played, you can click would you like to know more, and it shows you more of the top cards being played. Just to give you some ideas, I mean, these are guys that are obviously playing in tournaments quite often. You can look up, I believe you can even look it up by the creator of the deck. Yeah, I can click right here and I can see every deck that this Mark Vogot's played in Commander ranked events, and you can see that he's placed first or second in fairly large events consistently, so that the decks he's playing are obviously going to be decks that you're going to want to try to play. But like I said, it's a great little site, and hope if you guys have any questions, let me know in the comments and I'll get back to you guys. Thanks.